to the sky, 'cause we got the fire, fire, fire. Yeah, we got the fire, fire, fire. And we're gonna let it burn, 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 burn.
And we're live.
Hello and welcome back to another Where Do You Keep Your Finger Trophies episode of the First Time Watchers podcast.
Because we like to watch.
My name is Tim Costa.
I'm Romeo de Silva.
And I'm Durant. Robert G. Durant.
What we like to do on the FTW podcast is find a movie none of us have seen and watch it together and then discuss. These movies could be new, they could be old, or something that's on all of our list of shame. Stay tuned to the very end of this episode to hear each of us make a very special movie recommendation. And you can always email us at firsttimewatchers@gmail.com. Speaking of feedback, breaking news, I guess, just before we started recording, Wonder Woman 1984 is going to get a very small theatrical release for whichever theaters are going to be opening, but also it's going to HBO Max on Christmas Day.
Watch with the family if you have family to go see. If you're going to see your family.
How about this, Wally? Let's give advice right now. Don't go see your family.
All right, here's where I stand on that. If your family is following the same protocols as you are, you should be fine.
Yeah. Wear a mask anyways. At least wear a mask. Hermano, what do you think? Big tentpole release coming to streaming service.
I'm a little surprised, to be honest. I assumed that everyone was just gonna push everything back, till next year. I hadn't heard this until you just mentioned it. I know they were kind of poking it around as to maybe doing that, but I just figured based on how the budget on that film and whether or not they could actually make their money back if they put it just on a streaming service, I'm assuming they think they're going to do something like they're going to get a bunch of people to sign up for HBO Max, and that'll maybe soften the blow a bit.
Here's the thing: is HBO Max is not available outside of the United States yet, and I have to assume that they're on the verge of making a deal with Roku, and I think that they just also announced Amazon, Fire TV, but they still have a big market to tap into once those become available. But also, like I said, it's not available outside of the United States, so I don't know where the hell they're going to get their money.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting experiment, I guess, to see if I don't know if they, because they're not going to charge like Mulan did on Disney Plus, right? It's
no.
Just if you have the service, you get it.
No, exactly. Soul, the Pixar movie, is going straight to Disney Plus instead of theaters on
that I had heard
on Christmas Day. So that's another big tentpole. They don't want to push it to next year. Next year, if you look at the calendar for next year, how crowded it is.
Yeah,
for big
Everything
movies.
comes out 2021.
Everything.
Yeah, I assume that's what a lot of theaters or Warner Brothers, Disney, they're all just kind of we can't cram every single movie we have into next year. It's going to be way too crowded. They're probably just starting to. I bet we're going to see more of this, more of these places that have streaming services like Disney and Warner Brothers and stuff like that. They're going to have to start throwing some stuff on there because what else? They're still sort of making movies, right? Batman is still filming.
It's a very interesting predicament we're in right now in terms of what movies have been completed, have been put on hold, what movies were in the middle of filming and ready to be released in a relatively short period of time. Anyways, maybe we'll have a bonus episode on Wonder Woman 1984 during our winter break. Moving on, in this episode, we continue our second time watcher series to discuss a film from Walter's childhood, Darkman. But before we get into that, it is time for Yay or Nay. This is the part of the show where we discuss what we have seen recently on our own. Hermano.
All right, I watched a couple things. First up, I finished up the second season of The Boys on Amazon Prime. I was a surprising fan of the first season. I had kind of waffled on seeing it. I was felt a little bit jaded, the superhero stuff, as I've said much in the past. But this kind of brought me back a little bit. It's much darker. It's much more adult oriented. It's kind of a unique look at superheroes in kind of our modern society and kind of, having stories revolving around things that are kind of in the cultural zeitgeist right now. Specifically with kind of how the first season wraps up is I don't think this is a big spoiler, but they sort of introduced the idea of like a super terrorist. And there's like this kind of running gag where Homelander, the kind of superhero, Superman like character on The Boys, keeps telling everyone that we should just call them super villains instead of super terrorists, and that super villains is more catchy, and it plays into the whole marketing aspect of the show is going for, with these superheroes being basically property of this company. And they kind of roll in some storylines into the second season with stuff that's kind of timely, with the rise of white nationalism, stuff like that. There's a superhero that I don't want to spoil too much, but has a troubled backstory. Let's just say not nice. And I like it. I like the show overall. Like I think the second season was, I think, just as good. They set up some other stuff going forward that I'm looking forward to the third season, what they do with it. Like I said, it's super dark. It's pretty realistic with when you see like what like Superman's laser vision would actually do to someone, or there was like laser eyes where he just like cuts through shit. Like you see this guy use it and just cutting people in half and stuff, and it's like, yeah, that's probably what would happen. And like these people's powers are off the wall crazy, like, and you see it done in probably a realistic way of what it would do to a human body that's not super. So not for the kids. I think you guys might like it if you haven't started watching it already, especially Wally. I think Wally would dig it. Tim, I think you'd like it too.
I have so much to watch. Hermano.
Yeah, they're like 8-episode seasons too, I think. So it's not a huge investment if you're want to dip your toe into that. So
it's not the easiest thing when I'm watching 22 episode seasons of ER.
Damn, swear to God. All right, well, that's a yay for The Boys. And then I watched I think this is the most recent release on HBO. The new movie from Saturday was Doolittle.
Oh my God, Hermano.
Well, Tim, you don't even have to ask why I saw this. My kids had seen a trailer for it, recognized Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, said, let's watch the talking animal movie.
You know how poorly reviewed this was when this was released earlier in the year?
I did. I had the ending spoiled for me. I was really looking forward to seeing that visualized. But, let me see the synopsis here. A physician who can talk to animals embarks on an adventure to find a legendary island with a young apprentice and a crew of strange pets. So this is Robert Downey Jr. is in this, Antonio Banderas, Michael Sheen, bunch of young kids, and talking animals. The voices on the animals are all famous people too. I'm not going to read this long list though. So this is the first post Iron Man thing, I think, for Robert Downey Jr., right?
Sure.
Think so. And oof. Oof, the biggest of oofs. Not great. Not a great performance from him. I can't tell if he's phoning it in or if it's just a bad performance. The movie is clearly not aimed at adults. There's really nothing in there for an adult. For kids, though, it's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. There's fart gags. There's animals acting silly. The voice work is fine. The effects are all great. Like it looks like a good movie. It's just not a good movie. It's really quick. It feels really like a rushed, bare bones kind of A to B story. The ending is everything I'd heard it was, and maybe even more. Pretty bad. What it's going for, but again, not for adults, but for my kids were laughing. Like it's just a funny, silly, visualization of Robert Downey Jr. and a dragon interacting. I mean, for kids, sure, yay. I think if you have kids, they'll like this. For adults, I would say stay far away. So, nay for me, but yay for my kids.
Oh, Wally.
All right, I got two little things. Just kind of going through lately what's been offered for free or included with Prime, with my Amazon Prime order, and I've been watching some fun little like mid 80s to late 80s movies that I hadn't heard of before. I'm gonna start with the lesser of the two, and that was Night of the Demons from 1988, directed by Kevin Tenney. 10 teenagers party at an abandoned funeral parlor on Halloween night. When an evil force awakens, demonic spirits keep them from leaving and turn their gathering into a living hell. This one is very much the writer director had to have watched Evil Dead and decided to make their own version of it, because there's a lot of Evil Dead-ish things in here. It starts off with these kids having a party inexplicably in an old funeral home. There's a spooky story about it. They do a séance, and then people start getting possessed one by one. And like the makeup, the practical effects on this are very low budget. It's usually some like wrinkly skin and some scary looking teeth, but they really blew their money in a set of prosthetic boobs just for a single scene in which a character can jam a lipstick tube into her nipple, and that's the only reason why they exist. Outside of that, it's basic entry level movie making, I would say. And it's very, they even do like the Evil Dead Sam Raimi camera run from like the ground level, running through like the buildings as the first person gets possessed. So it's not bad, it's not great, but it's a decent little low budget horror flick. And then one that I really enjoyed that is for some reason rated a whole point lower on IMDb. This movie was just a shit ton of fun for me. Directed and written by Stephen King from 1986, Maximum Overdrive.
Oh, you had never seen this?
I didn't even know this movie existed.
Really?
Until I saw the description of it. A group of people try to survive when machines start to come alive and become homicidal. This movie's great.
Yeah, this is one of those so bad it's good type of movies. He was so strung out on coke while making this movie. It's there's a lot of stories about it.
Oh, I can imagine. I mean, you've got Commissioner Gordon from 3 years later will be in Batman. You've got Lisa Simpson. You've got Emilio Estevez, and a bunch of killer angry trucks.
Yeah.
And damn, this movie's not like it's just dumb fun. The bit with the Morse code and the horn is pretty great. This movie's just a lot of fun. This is a solid yay for me. And definitely give it a look if you haven't seen it before. I thoroughly loved every minute of this.
Okay, 3 things from me, all released in the United States this year. Once again, I'm still trying to catch up on 2020 movies to flesh out my best of list. And first up, from Russia, in a movie that just recently landed on Hulu, and it's called Sputnik. The lone survivor of an enigmatic spaceship incident hasn't returned back home alone. Hiding inside his body is a dangerous creature. Like I said, is Russian, starring a bunch of Russian people that I'm not going to begin to pronounce their names right now. But this is a gnarly little creature feature. I think it does a great job of balancing the horror elements with the psychological exploration of those affected and investigating the situation. I think it also has a strong emotional core that, hits home by the end. While you were just talking about 80s movies, this is actually a pretty cool 80s throwback that features some typical, archetypes of the era, like the scientist who wants the glory, the general who can't divulge information but also has a god complex, and like the unwitting visitor who gets more than she bargained for. Like I said, it's a lot of fun. It's really interesting. It keeps you guessing as to where it's going. I will say the creature itself isn't that original, but I think the movie overcomes many tropes. So I would recommend Sputnik, and like I said, it's available on Hulu. Another movie that was released this year, Proxima, starring Ava Green. An astronaut prepares for a 1-year mission aboard the International Space Station. Written and directed by Alice Winocour. Like I said, stars Ava Green, also co-stars Matt Dillon. Matt Dillon actually plays, it's like he was born to play the arrogant American astronaut. That's his role in this movie. He's a bit of an asshole. But this movie overall is very well done. A look at the emotional cost of preparing for space travel. Ava Green is great in this. She plays a mother who has to come to terms with leaving behind her young daughter. It's the movie itself, I think, is pretty insightful in many ways. Not just in the toll it takes on the family, but how it can distract and drain someone who must put aside all of that and focus on those extreme tasks and environments of training for this kind of mission. The director keeps things simple. I don't think she ever does anything flashy. Like the most experimental she gets is using a GoPro type camera, but she keeps it within the context or the framework of the narrative. But it's a nice change of pace and continues like the personal heart of the film. So I recommend Proxima. And Tim's pick of the week is Driveways, which co-stars Brian Dennehy in one of his final performances before he passed away. A lonesome boy accompanies his mother on a trip to clean out his late aunt's house and ends up forming an unexpected friendship with the retiree who lives next door. This movie really sneaks up on you. It's a very sweet story about this young boy. It's both like a coming of age story for this young boy as well as this older man who's coming to terms with his life. And it's about this emotional bond between the two of them. You know how I always say show, don't tell? This is the ultimate show, don't tell movie where it gives just enough information to let you into these people's lives and let you fill in the blanks. It's another one of those movies where I appreciate how the script doesn't hold back at times. It really lets the characters breathe and feel honest and true. And, sometimes they react harshly in certain situations that feels true to life. Brian Dennehy, like I said, he's great in this, and he has a monologue in this movie that had me in tears. I thought it was a great way for to wrap up his career, if you will. So that's the highest recommendations for Driveways. This again?
You should have seen this coming, no?
Hello, friends.
Oh, there he is.
Oh, you were looking for me?
Oh, no, of course not. I mean, who else would let a truckload of turkeys into the studio?
You sound upset.
Well, turkeys are literally everywhere.
They're a gift that keeps on giving.
But you know what show is a gift to podcasts?
The In Session Film Podcast.
That's right, Tim. The In Session Film Podcast is JD and Brendan.
I wouldn't mind dropping a Brendan tonight.
What was that, Tim?
What?
Never mind!
What?
Anyways, each week the In Session Film Podcast chooses a movie to review.
Then creates a top 3 list based on what they just saw.
This week, the In Session Film Podcast is reviewing Edward Scissorhands for the film's 30th anniversary.
And a top 3 list of movie empathy moments.
You can find their show on Apple Podcasts by searching for, you guessed it, the In Session Film Podcast.
Or on the web at insessionfilm.com.
So if you're looking for more great movie reviews and discussion,
then check out the In Session Film Podcast on Apple Podcasts.
Or on the web at insessionfilm.com.
Wally, what do you plan on doing with all these turkeys?
Glad you asked.
No, we're not doing this again! This is a Second Time Watchers episode, so that means time to play a game we like to call
Movie Battle Royale.
This is where we use flickchart.com to create our collective top 10 list of all time. We'll be pitted with 5 pairings of movies and decide which one is better with each battle. Are we ready?
Let them fight.
First up, X-Men: The Last Stand versus Gremlins.
That's the third one, isn't it?
Yes, it is the third one.
Oh, well, then Gremlins it is. Because that third X-Men movie is nothing but trash.
I wouldn't say nothing but trash. There's good moments in there.
It's terrible.
It's not terrible. It's a perfectly
It's
serviceable
terrible.
movie.
What's funny is I caught the beginning of X-Men Last Stand the other day. My brother was over for dinner and it was on TV, and it was the opening where Charles and Magneto go visit Jean when she's younger.
Yeah.
And they did that de-aging effect on him. I think it's one of the earliest times I remember seeing someone like an actor de-aged.
Yeah.
And it's obviously early. It doesn't look completely terrible, but you can just tell it looks like they just stretched the skin backwards to like hide all the wrinkles on their faces. It looks almost unsettling, but that film, like I continued to watch for a little bit, and it seems so dated. Like year by year, it gets more and more dated compared to what we're getting now. But Gremlins is timeless, so Gremlins.
It's true. It's true. Gremlins is timeless. Gremlins it is. Next up, Team America, World Police, America, fuck yeah, versus The Wizard of Oz.
Well, we'll have to go with The Wizard of Oz on this one, even though Team America does have its merit.
Oh, sure. Yeah, Wizard of Oz. Talk about a timeless movie. Hermano, weigh in.
Oh, for sure, Wizard of Oz. I'm still want to show it to my kids, but I'm just not sure how they would react to it. I feel like it starts off, it's kind of a hard sell in the beginning, but once it gets colorized, I think they might be more in.
Colorized. That's funny. Next up, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire versus the original King Kong.
I don't think I've ever seen the original 1930s King Kong.
Holy shit. You know what? We're going to have to put some interesting films, whether or not we've seen them or not, coming up to our 500th episode if we're really ending at 500, So I think we're going to have to put
that on the list. Put that on the list because, I mean, it feels like a list of shame movie, but I don't qualify it as one.
Why?
I don't know. I think it's because it's been remade so many times that it just kind of fades from memory.
I don't know. I think it's a seminal movie. I think that it's obvious why it holds the title of classic.
I mean, the only version of King Kong I see was the one from like 2000.
Oh, Peter Jackson did it.
Yeah, Jackson one with Jack Black.
Yeah, that's actually.
Oh wow! I think I've seen them all.
Huh. Have you all seen Goblet of Fire though?
Yes.
Okay. So it is Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire versus Being John Malkovich.
That's a tough.
It's not a tough one. It's Being John Malkovich. Come on.
Wow, Tim, you're the Harry Potter huge fan here.
Oh, look, Being John Malkovich is a brilliant movie.
No, it is a good movie. I think they're both good, but I think that when it comes to comparing them as individual movies, I also have to keep in mind that Goblet of Fire is part of a series and not really a standalone thing on its own.
True. I was gonna go with Being John Malkovich, but I was just surprised to hear Tim so vehemently say Being John Malkovich. I thought he would at least be able to qualify it with Harry Potter's great though.
Okay, next up, The Goonies versus No Country for Old Men.
Oh, this is a tough one.
This is not tough at all.
kind of the same thing.
No, this is not tough at all. Oh my God, The Goonies. By the way, putting it on the record in case people don't know, The Goonies is awful. It's a terrible, terrible, terrible movie.
It's not terrible. You know what? I might have to give this to The Goonies.
Oh God,
I'm going basically just based on how I feel right now.
You are a moron.
No, it's a fun little movie. It's got all sorts of little like tidbits for everyone. You got the kid with I really wanted to be Data when I was a kid because he had all the cool gadgets.
No Country for Old Men is one of the best neo-westerns you'll ever see.
I'm not saying it's not, but I gotta compare these head to head, and I think that The Goonies has much more staying power than No Country for Old Men.
Oh, that's bullshit! Jesus Christ!
No, it's not. you see people bringing it back left and right for revivals and the drive-in movie theater, and even like when the Cinema World was doing those classic movie nights, that was always on the list.
Yeah,
that was always in rotation.
It has broad appeal for dumb people. Yeah, I get it. Hermano, what do you weigh in?
Well, what I'm about to do is what I thought Tim was going to do for the Harry Potter versus what was it again?
Yeah, John Malkovich.
John Malkovich.
Yes.
The Goonies is not a dumb movie. This is the movie that I when Tim makes these declarations like it's a dumb movie, this is where I constantly question where Tim's childhood is. Because I'm like, how did you not love this as a kid?
I didn't see it as a kid.
Movie.
I didn't see it as a kid.
That's what yeah, okay, so kind of makes a little bit more sense. But I mean, if you would have seen this as a kid, I think completely your opinion on it would change.
Yeah, because kids are dumb. Kids are dumb. That's why.
No, kids aren't dumb. It's a fun movie for kids, and as you grow up, you look back at it fondly. It's not like I think it's like some great movie. I'm still going to pick No Country for Old Men. I think it's a better film overall, but I don't completely dismiss the Goonies. I think the Goonies has value. I think it's a good kids movie. I think watching it, even as an adult, I have fun with it. I kind of relive, my childhood in a small sense. So I think there's value there. I think you missed out not watching it as a kid, but yes, No Country for Old Men is a better film. I think I agree with Wally though that Goonies has more staying power. No Country for Old Men's not a, it's a good movie and it's a classic eventually, but like Goonies has staying power. It's still talked about to this day. It came out in the 80s.
No, I agree because it's a family film and it can be viewed by a broader audience. Absolutely. So, in terms of that context, sure, I get it. But moving on, please, God to save me. The first Borat versus Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet, or Romeo plus Juliet.
Is that the one with Leonardo DiCaprio?
Yes.
First Borat.
I still say that Baz Luhrmann's Romeo plus Juliet is a good movie. It's really well done, I think.
I can't get into that. The modern sensibility with the old timey language, it's such a jarring thing for me.
I think that's what works so well with it.
That's the thing that completely I'm like, nope.
It's really interesting to me. Hermano.
You know what's funny is I saw it in the theater, and I remember going in to the theater thinking that because it seemed more modern, that the dialogue was going to be updated to more modern dialogue, and it wasn't. And I was just like so thrown off, but I immediately settled in, and it didn't detract necessarily, because I remember most of the trailers just seeming like almost like a music video. I feel like they didn't really focus on how the dialogue was to maybe not turn off people that they thought they might be turned off by it. That old timey Shakespearean dialogue. Yeah, as much as I love Borat and I think Sacha Baron Cohen's a genius, I think I kind of appreciate the Baz Luhrmann Romeo and Juliet a bit more.
Nice job. Good. Choosing the right side. Good job.
I will cry for you. I will cry for you. I will wash away your pain with all my tears and drown your fear.
Do you like movie podcasts hosted by inebriated people? That's Kai with the cracking voice and Heather's touched by evil. One thinks he's Spider-Man, the other is a ninja. It's the Man I Love Film podcast, it's the Milkcast.
Hey everybody, I'm Kai,
And I'm Heather.
and we are the hosts of MILFcast, the Man I Love Films podcast, the unofficial official podcast of ManILoveFilms.com. This is a podcast where we like to talk about what we've been watching, talk about movies, but mainly we just like to drink, be silly, and play a whole bunch of games. So we think every other week you should grab a drink, snuggle up, and let us make sweet love to your ears.
Otherwise, we'll make sweet love to your couch.
So come and find us on iTunes. Just search for MILFcast.
This podcast is a proud member of the Lamb Podcasting Network. Find the network at largeassmovieblogs.com.
Pain for you. I will twist the knife and bleed my
Okay, let's talk about Darkman.
Is Darkman. I gotta tell you something about me. He's a cockroach. You think you kill him, and he pops up someplace else. In the darkest hour, there's a light that shines on every human being. But one. Darkman, rated R. Starts Friday at theaters everywhere.
The plot: a brilliant scientist left for dead returns to exact revenge on the people who buried him alive. The director, Sam Raimi. The actors, Liam Neeson, Frances McDormand, Colin Friels. Walter, before we get into it, why don't you remind us why you chose this movie as your second-time watcher's pick?
So we have a running list that you've created for us to be able to track what we're going to watch, and it's got all of our second-time watchers picks on it. And like one movie that I was really kind of hoping to be able to get to see at some point is this movie Fortress that was in it. It's an Australian movie, but like finding copies of this thing is damn near impossible. And like for some reason I was just at work and Darkman popped into my head one day, and I was like, we should review that. I'm going to call this an audible. I'm going to take this off. It's not even on my list of second-time watches, but I know that Tim and Herman are probably going to dig watching this again. So I'm going to definitely go with that. And that's what Genesis Darkman for this second time around.
So what about you, Hermano? What is your history with this movie, and what was this rewatch for you?
My first viewing was actually in the theater. It's one of my earliest theater-going experiences. I haven't seen it in quite a long time, but I do remember enjoying it. It's before I even knew who Sam Raimi was. I remember kind of being a fan of it, and I think it's later on down the road, once I realized who Sam Raimi was and realizing that he directed Darkman, it just kind of all made sense as to why I've always kind of appreciated him as a director. I realized some of the earlier touches he would use later on in some of his later films in Darkman. I've probably only seen it a total of probably like 3 or 4 times since it came out in the 1990, I believe. And yeah, I've always been kind of a fan. It's interesting. It's kind of a low-level superhero movie of sorts, kind of a vigilante type thing, but not really. It's I don't know. It's kind of a unique thing, and I've always kind of been impressed because it was sort of an original story as well. It's not based on anything, right? It's not like a comic book character or anything like that.
Right.
So I kind of appreciate it on that level. It's kind of, you don't typically get a lot of original stories anymore. Everything's based on a property. So yeah, I've always kind of been a fan of it.
Yeah, I didn't see this in the theater, but I certainly saw it on home release, and then I revisited it again about 2 years ago. And it was probably the first time in about 25 years I had seen it. So it's not like this was, part of my, formative years of film watching or had any kind of impact on me. I remembered it fondly. I remember enjoying the style, I think. I didn't really remember too much about the story itself. But on these rewatches, it's really interesting of how much this reminded me of like a Paul Verhoeven film, like in terms of its style and the aesthetic. There's just a certain technique that they use regarding the camera that's similar, regarding the color palettes and also the movements of characters, almost like they speed up or speed ramp character movements at times. I'm specifically reminded of like Total Recall for some reason. I think the same year, actually. Yeah, on this watch, it's really interesting how Raimi clearly shows a fondness for something like the classic Universal horror films, as well as something that he wants to create like a comic book film in the mold of like Batman and the Shadow. I know behind the scenes he had been wanting to actually do those movies. Especially The Shadow, but things fell through. One thing I'm not sure about is Frances McDormand. I'm not sure. She doesn't really sell me on the role here. She doesn't really exude the love interest or the damsel in distress very well. I think she does a better job, obviously, in a movie like Fargo or even other movies where she allows her, get across this quirky, more of a quirky type of character. Danny Elfman's music. I mean, look, his music is. He's someone whose music who is really easy to pick up, but it's amazing how similar this score is to his Batman and Spider-Man scores. So it's just really interesting to see this movie as a big mix, like a melting pot of ideas. And speaking of the ending of this movie is shockingly close to the first Spider-Man, Sam Raimi Spider-Man. It's almost exactly the same. But no, I like it. It's a good, fun watch. It really is. What about you, Wally?
Oh, picture it. Sicily, 1922. Here I am, going into the movie theater to go watch Darkman. And just, I had never seen anything like this before. And I had seen the Batman from the year prior. And that was like my jam still at this point, And walking in and seeing this was not like Batman. It had that cool shadow look to it, and I love the idea of a character with all the bandages on his face. He looks like terrifying, but he's supposed to be the good guy, but he's still scary as shit looking because of all the swabbing on his face. And then when you get into the actual story, I'm like, oh no, this is really cool. So much so that this became this replaced Batman as the top tier superhero movie for me around that time. And having seen it in the theater, a bunch of my friends hadn't. And at the time we were playing, we were doing the Marvel Universe role playing game. And I basically built Darkman as a character under everybody's noses and just had a ball just kind of furthering the adventures of this character, in our games, being able to make different masks and stuff like that. And just, I always forget, speaking of Frances McDormand, Tim, I always forget that she's the love interest in this movie for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, I know Liam Neeson's the lead, and then and it happens every time on every rewatch. I'm like, oh yeah, Frances McDormand's in this. She's the love interest. For some reason, I keep thinking it's someone else and not her. And I maybe it's because I'm used to seeing her as she is now. So I don't really, think of her in that that far back as far as movies. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, I always think it's Laura Dern that's in this.
Oh, jeez.
And then yeah, that's my first thought. That's who I first pictured. But then Frances McDormand walks on. I go, oh wait, no, hold on, that's Frances McDormand. That's who this is in this movie. But this movie is just a fun ride. This is I would say the precursor to the modern superhero movie that we get now.
Let's get into the title, Darkman. So what's up with the title?
Because the skin only works when it's dark. That's the only way the skin can
right,
survive.
but when does he ever use this? Why doesn't he ever take her out during nighttime and use the mask during the nighttime?
I mean, that would have a nice little twist to it, because you would think that maybe there'd be some sort of romantic rekindling, but at that point she'd be like, oh, let's go back to my place and we can have ourselves a little intimacy time. But he's still burned underneath that skin, unless he did a whole entire bodysuit of it.
Still, I mean, it never comes into play. Hermano, did it ever bother you?
Not really. I kind of like that about the film, that which is why I mentioned that it's unique, because he's barely this character as Darkman. He mostly uses kind of disguises to kind of work out this scheme that he's trying to get revenge on some of these characters that did him wrong, and it's basically putting on disguises as other bad guys and tricking the bad guys into thinking he's someone he's not. And he's mostly using his mind at that point, which I think is interesting, because he started off as kind of an intelligent guy who was trying to figure something out, and he's not using his increased strength or rage or anything like that to just go and dismantle people. He's using this kind of trickery, and that it doesn't go for the more excessive action, or except for towards the end, obviously, but it's mostly kind of a cat and mouse type thing of sorts.
Yeah, no, It's a fun movie, and the style of it is really interesting. One scene specifically is that the carnival where he bends the fingers backwards, and it really uses Raimi's signature camera fisheye lens on all three of the faces and the reactions. It's very similar to his early films. That must have been wild for you, Wally.
Yeah, it is. And there's a lot of, you can see a lot of his like touches. And just other scenes too, like where his brother is walking through the alleyway, and Darkman drops behind him, and he's like, "Huh, huh," and then he turns around, ah! Like that's another like Raimi-esque thing to have, like the POV of the character like looking at all the boxes, and then you go to that wide shot or the medium shot where he turns around and like just gets grabbed by like the face. And then the other great thing is just the use of prosthetic dummies that I loved in this as well. Like when he has his brother and he like jams him up through the manhole cover.
Oh yes.
And just dummies, and like and you have the POV of the cars like driving by, imminent peril until finally the last one gets him.
The good thing about that is it's really interesting because Sam Raimi has a very good technique of capturing like a plasticity to people's reactions and their expressions. So during that moment, it's hard to tell if that really is a prop, a dummy, or something like that.
Yeah.
Just because of the way he's been filming the whole movie from the start. So it's such a unique way of using the camera that. It's also just really interesting when you look at it from the perspective of his filmography and how he progressed from The Evil Dead, and then compare it to this, and then compare this to Spider-Man, his Spider-Man films, and just see that progression and how he honed his techniques, and he created in Spider-Man 2 the best superhero movie of all time. And like within the past year, I think I had said I had rewatched his trilogy there, and that first Spider-Man is still a little rough around the edges. Like there's the Times Square sequence, which is a big set piece, but it also feels a little clunky in terms of the way it's edited, in terms of the way the color palette is with the props and the practical effects. It's just, it's very rough around the edges, especially when you compare it to more modern films, and especially Spider-Man 2, where he honed everything to perfection. It's really, really amazing to see his progression as a filmmaker. And also, in terms of a filmmaker, how wide of a variety of types of films he has. A Simple Plan.
Western and The Quick and the Dead. He's got Spider-Man. He's got Darkman. He's got the horror stuff from Evil Dead. His more recent horror stuff like Drag Me to Hell.
Yeah, and then A Simple Plan, which is a very straightforward and very well done thriller, about deception and whatnot. And then you have The Gift, which is another interesting thriller starring Cate Blanchett. And he has a number of films where I'm like, if you didn't know, you would be like, he directed those?
Yeah.
So, kudos to him as a filmmaker being able to, Hermano, you talk about this all the time, filmmakers who are able to go out of their comfort zone, right?
Yeah, absolutely. He's definitely one of those guys that I can point to. And speaking of him, like, he elevates this material. Like,
sure.
If I think anyone else has this film, it's stuck in the 80s and we're not talking about it right now.
Yes, absolutely.
You know what I mean? It's barely out of the 80s and it feels like it still has like those 80s sensibilities.
Yeah.
I agree. It definitely feels like Verhoeven at times, but it also feels very much like him. And, it was early in his career. We didn't really know him that well yet as a director, but you look back at it now and you see a lot of his touches, the Dutch angles, the reactionary shots with his brother, the carnival scene, like you already mentioned, Tim. Like, those are all some of the stuff, it obviously is a little bit dated with some of the effects, even towards the end. You can tell it's early green screen work and it's not like, super polished and composited perfectly, but, it's still kind of retains a sort of charm because of the time period, and this is what he had to work with, and he elevated and did the absolute most he could with it.
Let's get into spoilers. Oh, you know what? Even before spoilers, I totally forgot. Throwing this outfit there for our friend Will at Exploding Helicopter. There's not just one, but there's 2 exploding helicopters in this movie.
Yeah, and then Tim decided to clap back at me for pointing that one out.
Yes.
Which
Yeah.
then triggered an exploding helicopter's clap back.
The ending of this movie, as far as even just how similar it is to Spider-Man, just the whole. What do you think about the whole dancing on the beams thing there, Wally?
It's a Sam Raimi trait. He puts some of that weird shit in his movies all the time. Like, look at Drag Me to Hell. He's got a dancing goat. That's like taunting him, and it's it's that old school. Like, Sam Raimi's like an old school filmmaker. You know what I mean? And like the reason why he chose like a lot of these people is because they have that old school like look or feel about them. And it's just more of that old fashioned, heel getting heat by tap dancing on the rafters and taunting, the good guy to try to make a move, and then it becomes that fun swashbuckly part that makes for the end of the movie. You have the damsel in peril, and he's got to swoop in and save her.
Once again, another scene that he kind of takes into the Spider-Man movies. Hermano, what do you think about all that? Is it a little too silly for you? I mean, the movie is somewhat silly leading up to this anyways to begin with, but do you think it goes a little too far there?
The only part that I thought was a bit silly is the main bad guy that is not Durant, which I definitely want to talk about Durant a bit more.
Oh, yeah.
The main corporate bad guy, I guess. Like the big exposition dump of him being like, oh, yeah, I learned how to have great balance, basically, because I used to work in these high rises building these buildings. And he's like explaining as to why he's like totally comfortable up there and, totally like at ease, and maybe why he has the upper hand against someone like Liam Neeson's Darkman. And I was like, okay, this is a bit silly. It's like a bad guy sort of explaining his plan, except instead of explaining his plan, he's explaining his really good balance ability.
Also the whole reveal, the opening of the windows to reveal the cityscape being built is very RoboCop.
It is.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely reminded of that.
Yeah.
But you know what? We haven't talked enough about Durant. Durant has made it out of the 80s / early 90s as one of my like quintessential bad guys in movies. I remembered his name, and I hadn't seen this movie in probably like 15, 20 years.
Well, isn't there one of the sequels, like the third one, like The Return of Durant or something?
Yeah.
The second one I think is called Return of Durant.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Is it? Interesting.
Yeah, the third one I think is just called like Darkman Die or something like that.
Okay.
But he's pretty nefarious, like he's just it's weird because he's got a kind of unique kind of goofy look to him. His hair looks like a hairpiece. He chops people's fingers off and collects them. He chops them off with a cigar cutter,
which is
collects fingers for some reason.
It's a great, memorable thing.
It is
trait. Yeah,
and his opening scene where we're introduced to him, it's the opening of the movie, and he's like cutting the fingers off that guy, and he's like counting to 3 and stuff.
It's so good.
Solid.
I need to talk about that opening where everybody's surprised and they ambush them. Like, where do these cars come from in the boxes? And
crates.
and how do they have enough speed in order to come out flying so fast?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, though. It's got those like weird 80s physics and qualities to it, but it works because Sam Raimi somehow, I don't know, makes it all work and not completely. It's goofy, but not in a so bad it's good way, I guess. I don't know. There's a distinction, I think.
Kind of like
I have a mat on for that leg machine gun. I always said that if I ever got a prosthetic, I would absolutely find a way to hide a firearm in my prosthetic.
But think about that though. That's the only weapon they have at that point, and they're surrounded by people who have guns, and that is what takes them down essentially.
Kate mentioned too. She's like, "Don't these bad guys have guns?" And I'm like, "Yeah, but they're surprised."
Surprised. Yeah, they're surprised.
Also, I want to point out too. I don't know if you noticed it, but there's like as like the first wave of bad guys comes out of the garage, one of them's got a set of nunchucks.
Oh yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And then while they're stripping Durant's men, they're just having this absurd amount of weapons. Another pair of nunchucks.
Very 80s.
It's
very,
like
very 80s.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles mixed with Dick Tracy or something.
Yeah, I'm like, all right, so one of the bad guys has got nunchucks, and then one of Durant's guys also has nunchucks. We have a nunchuck issue in this city.
Did you like your Bruce Campbell cameo at the end?
I loved it. It's another Sam Raimi touch is finding a way to get him in there.
You know what? I know that Sam Raimi wanted to cast him in the lead role, and the studio balked at the idea. Hence the reason they went with Liam Neeson. But I really wonder, about Neeson versus Campbell. I think Campbell would have owned the role a little bit better. I like Neeson. I like him in it, but I think, especially considering the history between the two, I think he would have worked a little bit better in the role.
It would have been an interesting thing. I also know Bill Paxton was also up for the role of Darkman as well.
No, that would not have worked.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe. I definitely would have liked to see Bruce Campbell in that role. Did you guys also get vibes of kind of like a Phantom of the Opera type vibe?
Oh, sure, yeah.
With him, being reluctant to show himself to her and stuff like that. There's obvious vibes of that. And also, I feel like watching it this time, I was really more noticing that Christopher Nolan must have really stole inspiration for Harvey Dent from the Darkman look, because it's almost exact.
Interesting.
Exact same side of the face where he's really, scarred and burnt on one side of his face, the right side of his face. And on the left side of his face, you can kind of see through his cheek into his mouth and his teeth, which is exactly like Harvey Dent is revealed in The Dark Knight once he's burned. And I was like, wow, I wonder if he drew inspiration from Darkman.
Well, he'll never let you know. I'll tell you that.
No, he would not.
Yeah. So yeah, overall, it's a fun movie. Good sit, right? Anything else you guys want to mention? We're good.
I'm good.
Okay, let's get into grades. Wally, what would you give it as a kid and as an adult now?
All right. So as a kid, it was definitely an A+. As an adult, I still feel that it's an A-rated movie.
A-rated movie. Yeah, I think when I was younger, well, this came out in 1990. I would have been around 12 when this came out. I would have given it a solid B+, but I'll give it a solid B. Hermano.
As a kid, probably a solid A. As an adult, maybe drop it down a tiny bit, but not much. A-.
So our next second time watchers will be early next year, and it is my choice. I've decided on a little movie that stars Rick Moranis, and it is Little Shop of Horrors.
Wow, you liked this as a kid?
I did, yes, I did. This is from 1986, musical based off of the play, which was also a film in the late 60s or late 60s with, I think, Jack Nicholson, right? But yeah, redone by Frank Oz, stars Rick Moranis, and Bill Murray shows up in this, as well as
Steve Martin, right?
Steve Martin, yeah. And I remember, loving the practical effects, loving the music. I was, into musicals when I was younger, and if I saw this, I don't know, maybe a couple years after, maybe a year or two after it was released, I would have been 9 or 10, so it would have been in my wheelhouse. And who doesn't like Rick Moranis, right?
True.
Absolutely. Rick Moranis is awesome.
I remember being scarred a bit by the plant as a kid.
Oh, what's her name?
Audrey.
Audrey
that's right.
too.
Yeah.
It has some, you can have some scarring moments, absolutely, if you're a younger kid watching this.
I think I was 10 or 11 when I saw it.
That's funny. Wally, have you seen this?
I've seen it in snippets. I've never actually seen the entire movie.
Interesting. I'll be curious. Because I know you guys aren't, keen to watch musicals, so...
I know I'm not.
I think considering the cast and the direction and the humor involved in it, I think you guys will find something to appreciate in it. So
we shall see.
A Little Shop of Horrors. All right, that does it for this episode of the First Time Watchers podcast. Donate via patreon.com/firsttimewatchers or donate. No, I just said donate. Buy stuff at Zazzle.com/firsttimewatchers.
Talk to us on Twitter at 1STTimeWatchers on Twitter.
Or write to us at our email, firsttimewatchers@gmail.com.
Download our episodes on Apple Podcasts and Stitcher. Please leave a review because we love feedback. If you have any suggestions of movies for us to watch, please send a tweet or an email. Speaking of suggestions, let's recommend a movie. Wally.
All right, I'm going to go with a movie I talked about earlier in this episode, and that's 1986's Maximum Overdrive, because I had so much fun with it this time around. I think anyone who hasn't seen it will have an equally good time watching it.
I'm going to recommend a movie that was released in 2017. It is a movie starring Samara Weaving and Stephen Yeun, and it is called Mayhem. It's directed by Joe Lynch, and it's about a virus that spreads through an office complex, causing white-collar workers to act out on their worst impulses. Yeah, no, it's just about, essentially about office politics, kind of like a mix of Office Space meets The Raid. Enjoyable violence and mayhem that's hampered a little bit by a low budget, but because it can feel a little bit repetitive, but I think the director works around it with some flashy editing and some good use of slow-mo. And it just proves that Stephen Yeun and Samara Weaving should be bigger stars. They're really good in this movie. So Mayhem 2017. Give it a watch. Hermano.
All right, movie I'm going to recommend came out only 4 years after Darkman. Directed by Alex Proyas. The Crow. Huge fan of The Crow. When I was younger, saw it in the theater I think 2 or 3 times. I know Wally's a big fan.
Yeah, I am.
Brutally murdered, comes back to life as an undead avenger of his and his fiance's murder.
You're ignoring my raspberries.
Starring Brandon Lee. What?
You're ignoring my raspberries.
I am ignoring it.
Yes, we are.
Not going to pay you any mind, Tim. This movie is great. I remember having a ring that I wore in my angsty years.
I had all the t-shirts.
Yep, I had a ring that said "Love Never Dies" on the inside of the inscription. Wore it on my my finger there for a while. Yeah, I was a huge fan of this film when I was younger. I still am to this day. I love the soundtrack. I love the aesthetics of the film. It's dark. It's moody. I think it does it better than Darkman, if I'm being honest. Yeah, and I really am bummed that I think Brandon Lee would have been a huge star at this point, and sort of bummed at where the franchise has gone. I think this is one of those films that I wouldn't mind a remake of. I think it's time for a remake of The Crow, Tim.
It's
agree, right?
It's actually happening, to be honest with you. Yes, it's absolutely time for a remake of.
Watching The Boys, who I'd like to see as the new Crow? Carl Urban.
That'd be awesome.
I think he'd be perfect for the role.
Anyway, stay tuned for our next episode. We'll be discussing the 2015 horror comedy Deathgasm.
And that's the First Time Watchers podcast, because we like to watch.
Is everybody's on the floor acting crazy, getting local to the lights out. Music's on, I'm waking up. We stop the fire, and we don't need love. When we're sober now, we got love. There's no sleeping now, no sleeping now, sleeping now. Story down, they don't know what they heard. Shut the noise, play it loud, giving love to the world. Open rays in our hands, shining up to the sky. 'Cause we got the fire, fire, fire. Yeah, we got the fire, fire, fire. And we gonna let it burn, 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 burn. We gonna let it burn, 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 burn. Gonna let it burn, 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 burn. We gonna let it burn, 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 burn. When the lights turn down, they don't know what they heard. Shut the noise, play it loud, giving love to the world.
That's what I want to hear. I want to hear all the mundane stuff. Like I help my kid with school. I take out the trash.
I do take out the trash.
I rake the yard. That's
I
wanna
you know what
hear.
I do? I vacuum up leaves. I tell you, I have a leaf vacuum.
I don't think you have.
It's a leaf blower, but it also turns into a vacuum, and it's great. It's great. It's better when the leaves aren't wet. It was really disappointing the other day when it rained, but when it's not wet, it
fun.
sucks up leaves like no tomorrow. I love it. And it's better than raking and trying to get it all into a bag. Oh no, of course not. I mean, why else would oh fuck.